The Greyhound station at
Look at
5 in the
all the
morning has a
cows,
particular
sweetie.
smell. Stale
Wow,
coffee,
they're so
industrial
big.
disinfectant,
They are.
and something else
Let's go see
underneath.
them closer.
Something harder to
Okay.
name. The quiet desperation of people going somewhere they don't want to be, or leaving somewhere they can't stay. For us, it was both. My name is Willa Calloway. I was 19 years old, sitting on a hard plastic bench in the Denver bus terminal with my 16-year-old sister Sparrow pressed against my side. Her head was heavy on my shoulder. Her breath came slow and steady in the rhythm of deep sleep. I envied her that, the ability to sleep, the ability to shut out the world even for a few hours. I hadn't slept in 3 days, not since I signed the papers, not since I shook hands with a social worker whose name I'd already forgotten, not since I walked out the door of St. Catherine's group home for the last time. Just like that. 17 years of being someone else's responsibility, someone else's problem, someone else's file in a metal cabinet, and then nothing. A handshake and a closed door. Happy birthday to me. Everything we owned sat at our feet in 2 worn backpacks. Mine was army green, bought at a thrift store 4 years ago, when I still believed things might get better. Sparrow's was purple, faded almost to gray from years of use, the straps fraying at the edges where she'd reinforced them with duct tape. Inside those 2 bags was our entire lives, a change of clothes each, toothbrushes with bent bristles. My high school diploma creased from being folded too many times because I had nowhere safe to keep it flat. Sparrow's sketchbook, the one she never let anyone see, filled with drawings of places we'd never been and people we'd never meet. And $68 in crumpled bills stuffed into the bottom of my bag like a shameful secret. $68. That was what 17 years in the foster care system amounted to. That was my inheritance from a childhood spent in 12 different homes across 4 different states. That was the sum total of everything I had managed to save, to hide, to protect from the other kids who would steal anything that wasn't nailed down. $68 and a sister who refused to let me go alone. Sparrow had 2 more years left in the system. 2 more years of group homes and caseworkers and monthly check-ins with people who would forget her name between visits. 2 more years of being shuffled from bed to bed, school to school, life to life. But when I told her I was leaving, she looked at me with those big brown eyes and said 4 words that changed everything. I'm coming with you. I should have said no. I should have told her to stay, to finish school, to wait until she aged out too, to play it safe, but I couldn't. Because the truth was, I needed her as much as she needed me. We were all each other had. We had been all each other had since the day our mother walked out 4 years ago and never came back. So here we were. 2 sisters in a bus station at 5 in the morning, $68 between us. Nowhere to go, no one waiting for us anywhere in the world. The fluorescent lights above us buzzed and flickered. The sound was like an insect trapped in a bar of desperate and futility. A cleaning crew pushed mops across the far end of the terminal, leaving wet streaks on the concrete floor that reflected the harsh light like oil slicks. An elderly man slept on a bench across from us, his chin tucked into his chest, a newspaper spread across his lap like a blanket. A woman in a business suit paced near the ticket counter, her heels clicking a nervous rhythm as she checked her phone every few seconds. Everyone here was waiting for something, or running from something, or both. The plan, if you could call it that, was to take a bus south, Texas maybe, or Arizona. Somewhere warm where sleeping outside wouldn't kill you when the money ran out. And the money would run out. I knew that. I'd done the math 100 times in my head. $68, bus tickets, food, maybe a night or 2 in a cheap motel if we were careful. Then nothing. I figured I could find work, waitressing, cleaning, anything that paid cash and didn't ask too many questions about why a 19-year-old was traveling with a 16-year-old who should have been in school. Sparrow could finish her education somehow. Get her GED, make something of herself. We'd figure it out. We always figured it out. That was what I told myself anyway. That was the lie I repeated in my head like a prayer. We'll figure it out. We'll be okay. We've survived worse. But the truth was I had no idea what we were going to do. The truth was I was terrified. The departure board above my head flickered and hummed. Names of towns I'd never heard of cycled across the screen in orange letters. Amarillo, Albuquerque, El Paso, Tucson, Phoenix. They sounded like songs, like promises, like places where two girls with nothing could become something. I watched the names scroll past and tried to imagine our future in each one. Willa and Sparrow in Amarillo, Willa and Sparrow in Phoenix, Willa and Sparrow starting over, Willa and Sparrow finally free. But freedom felt a lot like falling, and I couldn't see the ground. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a cheap prepaid phone. The screen was cracked from when I dropped it last month. The battery perpetually hovered near death because the charging port was broken and I had to hold the cord at exactly the right angle to get any charge at all. I almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers never meant anything good. Bill collectors calling about debts that weren't mine. Scammers promising prizes I'd never win. Wrong numbers that wasted precious minutes that I couldn't afford to lose. But something made me swipe to answer, something I still can't explain. A feeling in my gut, a whisper in my ear, a hand on my shoulder pushing me toward a future I couldn't yet see. I pressed the phone to my ear. Hello? My voice came out rough, tired. The voice of someone who had been awake too long, worried too much, carried too heavy a load. Am I speaking with Willa Calloway? It wasn't a question. Not really. The voice on the other end was male, older, with the careful diction of someone who chose their words deliberately. A lawyer's voice. I'd heard enough of them in my life to know the sound. Lawyers had taken me from my mother. Lawyers had moved me from home to home. Lawyers had explained in patient tones why I couldn't stay where I was, why I had to go somewhere new, why the system was doing what was best for me even when it felt like punishment. I hated lawyers. Who's asking? My guard went up immediately. My fingers tightened around the phone. Sparrow stirred against my shoulder but didn't wake. My name is Milford Cross. Most people call me Judge, though I haven't sat on a bench in 15 years. I'm calling from Cedar Hollow, Nebraska, regarding the estate of Emmett Calloway. The name hit me like a physical blow. Emmett Calloway, my grandfather, a man I hadn't seen since I was 4 years old. A man my mother had described with such bitterness, such venom, that his name had become a curse word in our house. He abandoned us, she would say, her voice tight with anger. He never cared about any of us. Just that stupid farm, that stupid piece of dirt in the middle of nowhere. He's probably dead by now and good riddance. That's not possible. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant, like it was coming from somewhere far away. He's dead. He died years ago. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a rustle of papers, the creak of a chair. Well, yes, Judge Cross's voice was gentle now, almost apologetic. He passed away 3 weeks ago. I've been trying to locate you and your sister since then. It seems you and Sparrow are his next of kin. His sole heirs, in fact. Heirs. The word didn't compute. It belonged in old movies about rich people with mansions and butlers and trust funds. It didn't belong to a girl in a bus station with $68 to her name. Heirs to what I asked the question even though I was afraid of the answer. Even though I knew that whatever came next would change everything. There was nothing. He left us with nothing. Our mother said so. Judge Cross was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was measured. Careful. Your mother said many things, Miss Calloway. Not all of them were true. The words hung in the air like smoke. What do you mean he left you his property? A 150-acre dairy farm, including the main residence and several outbuildings. As his sole beneficiaries, the entire estate passes to you and your sister. Sparrow stirred against my shoulder again. Her eyelids fluttered. I pressed the phone harder against my ear, as if I could somehow make the words make more sense through sheer force of will. A farm. I repeated the word slowly, trying to make it real. A dairy farm, that's correct. It's located just outside the town of Cedar Hollow, about 4 hours from Lincoln. The property has been vacant for some time. Your grandfather was quite ill in his final years. He couldn't work the land anymore, couldn't care for the cattle. He sold most of the herd years ago just to keep the place from falling into foreclosure. I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, harsh and bitter. An elderly woman across the terminal looked up from her magazine and frowned at me. There must be some mistake. No mistake, Miss Calloway. The will is quite clear. I drew it up myself and I've known your grandfather for over 40 years. He was very specific about his wishes. Judge Cross paused again. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, slow and steady, the breath of a man who had delivered difficult news before and knew how to wait for it to sink in. There are, however, some complications. Of course there are. Outstanding property taxes. Your grandfather fell behind about 2 years ago when the medical bills started piling up. There's also a loan from the bank. He took it out to pay for his treatment. Cancer. It was slow but relentless. I closed my eyes. A grandfather I'd never known dying alone of cancer while I bounced from foster home to foster home. The property has been fallow for several years and will require significant work to become productive again. The house needs repairs. The barn needs repairs. Everything needs repairs, honestly. So what you're saying is, we inherited a pile of debt. Judge Cross chuckled softly. It wasn't a mocking sound, more like the laugh of someone who understood the irony of the situation. That's one way to look at it, but there's another option. An offer, actually. He paused again and I could almost hear him choosing his words. There's a development company, Stonebridge Holdings. They've been interested in your grandfather's land for years. They're willing to purchase the property, settle all the outstanding debts, and leave you with approximately $40,000. $40,000. The number hung in the air like a soap bubble. Fragile. Impossible. More money than I had ever seen in my life. More money than I could even imagine. $40,000 would change everything. A real apartment, real furniture, Sparrow back in school, college maybe someday. A future that wasn't just survival. Given your circumstances, Judge Cross continued, it might be the most prudent course of action. However, I would advise you not to sign anything until we've had a chance to speak in person. Their offer is, well, let's just say it's convenient. Perhaps too convenient. I didn't understand. I didn't understand any of this. 3 minutes ago, I was homeless. Hopeless. Headed south with $68 and a prayer. Now a stranger was telling me I owned a farm. 150 acres. A house, I want to see it. The words surprised me as much as they probably surprised him. Miss Calloway, I must advise you. The property is in a state of significant disrepair. The house hasn't been properly maintained in years. It's not really habitable at this point. You might be better off just accepting the offer and moving on with your lives. Is there a bus to Cedar Hollow? There was a pause, another rustle of papers. There's a Greyhound that connects through Lincoln. It's approximately 11 hours from Denver. I can have someone meet you at the station and take you to the property. Okay, the word felt solid in my mouth, a decision. The first real decision I had made in years that wasn't just about survival. Send me the directions. We'll be there tomorrow. I wrote down the information on the back of a crumpled receipt. My hands were shaking slightly. When I hung up, Sparrow was awake. Her brown eyes blinked at me in confusion. Sleep still clouded her face. Who was that? Or I looked at her for a long moment. My baby sister. 16 years old, but she'd already seen more hard times than most people see in a lifetime. She deserved better. She deserved so much better. That was a lawyer from Nebraska. Nebraska. She repeated the word as if it was foreign, as if I'd said Mars or Jupiter or some other impossible place. Apparently our grandfather died 3 weeks ago. He left us a farm. Sparrow stared at me, her mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Grandpa, the one Mom always said abandoned us, the one who died before I was born. He didn't die before you were born. I said the words, slowly letting them settle between us, like stones dropping into still water. He just died 3 weeks ago, and he left us everything he had. We sat there in the gray dawn light. The departure board flickered above us, still cycling through names of cities we would never visit now. Phoenix, Tucson, El Paso. Goodbye to all of them. And for the first time in 3 days, I felt something other than fear. I felt a tiny, fragile spark of hope. The bus ride was 11 hours of America unfolding outside the window. We left Denver as the sun came up. The city's glass towers caught the light like giant crystals glittering and cold. Then the buildings fell away, replaced by flat brown plains that stretched to the horizon in every direction. The landscape was so big, so empty. It made me feel small in a way I'd never felt before. Smaller than I'd felt in the crowded halls of St. Catherine's. Smaller than I'd felt in any of the dozen foster homes I'd passed through like a ghost. This was a different kind of small. Not the smallness of being insignificant. The smallness of being part of something vast. Something ancient. Something that had existed long before me and would exist long after I was gone. Sparrow slept for most of the trip. Her head rested against the window, her breath fogging the glass. Every now and then, she would shift in her sleep, mumbling words I couldn't make out. Her sketchbook lay open in her lap. She'd been drawing before she dozed off. A picture of a farmhouse with a wide porch and a big red barn behind it. I wondered if she was dreaming about it now, the place we were going, the home we might have. I watched her sleep and thought about our mother, Lorraine Calloway. Lorraine, who had bright red hair and a laugh like wind chimes. Lorraine, who could make pancakes shaped like animals and knew all the words to every Beatles song. Lorraine, who had tucked us in every night until she didn't, until she met Deke Slattery. I didn't like to think about Deke, about the way our apartment had changed when he moved in, about the arguments that leaked through thin walls late at night, about the money that was always short, the bills that were never paid, the refrigerator that was always empty, about the way our mother had seemed to shrink, to fade, to become a smaller and smaller version of herself until one day she just wasn't there anymore. She didn't even leave a note. I was 15 when she left. Sparrow was 12. We waited 3 days before anyone realized we were alone. 3 days of eating peanut butter straight from the jar and telling ourselves she'd be back any minute now, any minute. Then the school called and the social workers came, and suddenly we were in the system. 2 sisters, no parents, no relatives willing to take us in. That's what they told us anyway, no relatives. But now I knew that wasn't true. Now I knew there had been someone out there the whole time. A grandfather with a farm in Nebraska. A grandfather who, according to our mother, had abandoned us. But if he abandoned us, why did he leave us everything he had? The questions turned over in my mind as the bus hummed through Kansas, through the corner of Colorado, through the long, flat stretch of Nebraska. The towns got smaller and smaller. Their main streets were lined with brick buildings that looked like they'd been standing since the last century. American flags hung from porches. Pickup trucks lined the curbs. Churches rose white and clean against the endless sky. We changed buses in Lincoln, a city that felt quaint after Denver, smaller, slower. The new bus was older with seats that creaked and a driver who chewed tobacco and didn't talk much. The road got rougher. The towns got even smaller. The sky got bigger, a vast blue dome that seemed to press down on the earth with all the weight of heaven. Finally, after what felt like forever, the driver called out our stop, Cedar Hollow. We stepped off the bus into air that smelled different than any air I'd ever breathed. Clean, crisp, with notes of pine and damp earth and something else. Something green and alive. Something that smelled like growing things and open spaces and freedom. There was no station, just a covered bench next to a small general store. The sign above the door read Hensley's General in faded red letters. A cat slept in the window, its orange fur bright against the dusty glass. A man was waiting by an old blue pickup truck. He was heavy-set with a kind face weathered by years of sun and wind. When he saw us climb down from the bus with our backpacks, he straightened up and walked over. "You the Calloway girls?" It wasn't really a question. I nodded. "I'm Bill. Judge Cross sent me to fetch you." He tipped his cap slightly, a gesture from another era, another world. "Truck's over here." We climbed into the pickup. Sparrow and me squeezed together on the bench seat, our backpacks in our laps. The truck smelled like hay and engine oil and something sweet. Maybe pipe tobacco. Maybe just the smell of a life lived close to the land. Bill didn't talk much as he drove. Just pointed out a few landmarks in a voice like gravel rolling in a tin can. "That's the feed store. Town hall's over there. Baptist church been standing since 1892. The town was small, maybe 3,000 people. The main street looked like something out of an old movie. A diner with red vinyl booths visible through the window, a hardware store with rakes and shovels displayed out front, a barber shop with an actual spinning pole. Everything was neat, tidy, timeless. It felt like a place where nothing had changed in 50 years. A place where nothing needed to change because everything was already exactly as it should be. Then we left the town behind and drove out into the country. The road turned to gravel, then to dirt. The fields stretched out on either side, brown and fallow under the gray afternoon sky. Trees lined the horizon, their bare branches reaching up like fingers grasping at clouds. Bill slowed the truck and turned onto an even narrower road. More of a path, really, overgrown with weeds that scraped against the undercarriage like fingernails on a chalkboard. "This is it," he said it quietly, almost reverently. The farmhouse stood at the end of the drive. I don't know what I expected. Something out of a storybook, maybe. A red barn, green fields, happy cows grazing in the sunshine. The kind of farm you see on butter packages and milk cartons. What I saw was something else entirely. The house was 2 stories with a wide front porch that sagged dangerously in the middle. The white paint had peeled away in long strips, revealing gray weathered wood beneath. Several windows were boarded up with plywood. Others were just dark, staring out at us like empty eyes. To the right stood a massive barn. Its red paint had faded to a dull, rusty brown. One of its huge doors hung crookedly from a single hinge, swinging slightly in the wind with a slow, mournful creak. Behind it, I could see other outbuildings in various states of decay. A silo leaning slightly to one side, a smaller structure that might have been a milk house. Something that looked like it had once been a chicken coop, now collapsed into a pile of rotting wood. And surrounding all of it, stretching out to the horizon in every direction, were fields. 150 acres of them. But they weren't the green, productive fields of a working farm. They were wild tangles of weeds and thorns, some as tall as I was. Nature reclaiming what humans had abandoned. Nature erasing the work of generations. Bill stopped the truck and killed the engine. The silence rushed in, deep, profound, broken only by the cawing of a distant crow and the creak of that barn door swinging in the wind. "This is it," he said it again, and there was something apologetic in his voice now, something like pity. "I know it don't look like much. Been empty going on 3 years now since your grandfather got too sick to work it himself." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. "Old iron, heavy, cold. This is for the front door. Judge Cross said to tell you he'll call first thing in the morning. His number's on the keychain there if you need anything tonight." He paused. His eyes met mine and I saw something in them. Concern, maybe. Or warning. "There's no power or water running to the house right now. Company shut it off when the bills stopped getting paid. Be careful in there. Floors might not be solid everywhere." I took the key. It was heavier than it looked. "Thank you," Bill nodded. That look of pity was still in his eyes. That look that said, "You poor kids, what are you going to do now?" He got back in his truck, turned it around in a tight circle and drove away. The sound of the engine faded into the distance until there was nothing left but silence. Sparrow gripped my arm hard enough to bruise. "Willa," she whispered my name like a prayer. Or a curse. "This place looks haunted." I looked at the sagging house, the tilting barn, the wild fields that seemed to stretch on forever. This was our inheritance, not a gift, a ruin. The developer's offer echoed in my head. $40,000, sign the papers, take the money, walk away. It was the only sane option. No one could expect us to fix this. No one could blame us for leaving. At least let's look inside. I said it before I could talk myself out of it. The porch steps creaked under our weight. I tested each one before putting my full weight on it, avoiding the spots that looked ready to give way. Sparrow followed close behind me, her hand still gripping my arm. The key scraped in the lock, stiff from years of disuse. It took a hard shove with my shoulder, but the door groaned open. The smell hit me first. Dust, mildew, decaying paper, and underneath it all, the faint, ghostly scent of wood smoke from a fireplace that hadn't been lit in years. The air was cold, colder than outside, and utterly still. Like the house had been holding its breath, waiting for us. A fine layer of dust covered everything, so thick that the inside of the house looked like a gray monochrome photograph. Sunlight struggled through the grimy windows, illuminating swirling motes and long, slanted beams. The front door opened into a small entryway with a wooden coat rack and a faded rug. Boots still sat by the door, covered in dust. A man's boots, our grandfather's boots. To the left was a living room dominated by a huge stone fireplace. The furniture, a sofa, and a couple of armchairs was draped in white sheets, making them look like silent, lumpy ghosts. To the right was a staircase leading to the second floor. Its banister was wrapped in cobwebs so thick they looked almost solid. Straight ahead, a hallway led deeper into the house, into darkness. I stepped inside. Sparrow, I said her name without turning around. You can wait outside if you want. No, her voice was small but determined. We're doing this together. She stepped in behind me, and we stood there for a long moment, just breathing in the dust and the silence and the weight of all those empty years. I walked into the living room. My footsteps left clear prints in the thick dust on the floorboards. Each step stirred up small clouds that caught the fading light. I touched the cold stone of the fireplace, feeling the rough texture beneath my fingertips. The stone was solid, real. It had stood here for 100 years, warming generation after generation of Callaways. Had he sat here? Had my grandfather warmed his hands by this fire on cold Nebraska nights? Had he thought about us? Had he wondered where we were, what we were doing, whether we were safe? I pulled a sheet off one of the armchairs. The fabric beneath was faded, worn, but intact. I ran my hand over it, feeling the texture of decades of use. It was real. All of this was real. We spent the next hour exploring the ground floor. The dining room had a heavy wooden table and 6 chairs all covered in sheets like everything else. The kitchen was worse. Cracked linoleum, rusted appliances, unmistakable evidence of mice in the cupboards. But beneath the neglect there was something else. The walls were solid. The floors were level for the most part. The bones were good. The lawyer was right. This place wasn't habitable. Not yet. But it had been once. And maybe with enough work it could be again. I found his bedroom at the back of the house. It was simpler than the other rooms. A plain wooden bed frame with a mattress stripped bare. A single nightstand. A large wardrobe with doors that wouldn't quite close. But this room felt different. The air was less stale. Someone had been here more recently than anywhere else. On the nightstand sat a dusty glass and an old dog-eared paperback. The cover was too faded to read. I picked it up carefully. The pages were yellowed, fragile. This was the last thing he touched, I thought. The last book he ever read. I put it down gently, feeling like an intruder in my own inheritance. In the corner of the bedroom, half hidden by shadow, stood an old wooden gun cabinet. Its glass door was dusty but unbroken. I walked over and peered inside. A hunting rifle, old but well-oiled. The wood stock polished smooth from years of handling. Below it, on a small shelf, sat a box of ammunition still sealed. My grandfather had taken care of this weapon even when he couldn't take care of anything else. I didn't touch it, but I filed the information away in my mind, just in case. By the time we finished exploring the ground floor, the light outside was fading fast. The house sank into a deep, impenetrable gloom. My phone's flashlight was weak, and the battery was down to 8%. We need to go, I told Sparrow. Find a motel in town. Come back in the morning when we can see. She nodded. Her face was pale in the dim light. I went back to the living room to grab our backpacks, which we'd left by the door. As I walked past the fireplace, my foot caught on something. A loose floorboard. I stumbled, caught myself on the mantel, looked down. One of the wide oak planks right in front of the hearth was raised slightly, maybe half an inch on one side. I don't know what made me kneel down. I don't know what made me push on it. It wiggled. "Willa," Sparrow said from the doorway. Her voice was tight with something. Fear, maybe, or anticipation. "What is it? I don't know. Help me." Together we hooked our fingers under the edge and pulled. The board was heavy, but it came up with a groan of old wood. Beneath it was a dark, hollow space. My heart started to pound. In that space sat a metal box. It was an old Army surplus ammunition box, painted olive green. The paint was chipped and faded with age. It wasn't large, maybe the size of a shoebox. A small, rusty padlock secured the latch. "Oh my God," Sparrow breathed the words like a prayer. "What is that? I don't know." My hands were trembling as I lifted it out. It was heavy, solid. I set it on the floor and tried the lock. It held firm, refusing to budge. "We need to open it." Sparrow's voice was urgent now. I searched the kitchen in the dying light using the last of my phone's battery. I found an old meat tenderizer in a drawer, the kind made of solid metal. Back in the living room, I set the lock against the stone hearth and brought the tenderizer down hard. The sound was deafening in the silent house, a sharp crack that echoed off the walls and came back to us like a ghost. The first hit dented the lock. The second did nothing. I hit it again and again, grunting with the effort, my arm aching. On the fifth strike, with a final screeching protest of metal, the lock snapped and fell away. I sat back. breathing hard. My hand was shaking. "Open it," Sparrow whispered. I lifted the lid. The smell of old paper and leather drifted up like a memory from another time. Inside was not money, not gold, not treasure in any sense I would have recognized. It was full of paper. On top sat a thick, leather-bound journal, brown and cracked with age. Beneath it, a stack of envelopes tied together with a faded piece of twine, yellowed and brittle. And at the very bottom, a photograph. I picked up the photograph first. It was old. The colors had faded to sepia. It showed an old man with a weathered face and kind eyes sitting on the porch of this very house. The house behind him looked different. Fresh white paint, straight porch rails, flower boxes in the windows. In his arms were two small children, one about 4 years old with dark hair and serious eyes, one about 1 year old chubby and laughing, reaching for something out of frame. Me and Sparrow. "Willa." Sparrow's voice cracked. "That's us. That's us, isn't it?" I turned the photo over. On the back, in faded pencil, were the words, "Willa and Sparrow, Summer 2009. My heart stopped. I set the photo aside carefully, my hands shaking, and picked up the first envelope from the stack. My name was written on the front in a slanted, masculine script. Willa Calloway, my grandfather's handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers. The paper inside was thick, creamy, covered in that same dense script. It was dated 14 months ago. "My dearest Willa," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. It also means you have come back to this place, to this farm that has been in our family for 4 generations. And it means you have found this box hidden where I knew only someone who truly belonged here would think to look. I am sorry. I am sorry for the state you will find everything in. And I am sorry for the state I have left you in. I know your mother has told you stories about me, that I abandoned you, that I didn't care, that I left you behind without a second thought. I don't blame her for that. From her perspective, it is the truth, but it's not the whole truth. And you at 19 years old, you deserve to know everything. I never wanted to leave you. You have to believe that. When you were a little girl, 4 years old with scraped knees and endless questions, you were my whole world. You used to follow me around this farm trying to help with the cows. You were so small, the barn cats were bigger than you, but you wanted to do everything I did. You wanted to be a farmer, you said, just like Grandpa. I would give anything to have those days back. But your mother fell in with a bad man. His name was Deke Slattery. I don't know if you remember him. I hope you don't. He was charming on the outside, I'll give him that. He could make your mother laugh in ways I hadn't heard since your father died. But inside, he was rotten. He had debts, bad ones, gambling debts, the kind that follow you, the kind that get people hurt. He started taking money from your mother. Then he started looking at this farm. He saw it not as a home, but as an asset, something he could sell off piece by piece to fix his own mistakes. I told him to leave. I threw him off my property with my own 2 hands. But he had a hold on your mother that I couldn't break. She chose him. She took you and your sister in the middle of the night, and she told me she never wanted to see me or this farm again. I begged her to let you stay. I begged her on my knees in the driveway while she loaded you into that car. But she wouldn't listen. I think she was scared of what Deke would do if she left him with nothing. I think she was trying to protect you in her own way. But the protection she chose cost me everything. For years afterward, I sent money every month, without fail. I sold half the herd to do it. I sent enough for your mother to get a fresh start somewhere far away from Deke and his debts and his violence. I found out later that she never saw a dime of it. He was taking it, using it to pay off his sharks, digging them deeper and deeper into the hole. I tried to contact you. I wrote letters, more than 200 of them over the years. They all came back, returned to sender, address unknown. I tried calling. The numbers were always disconnected or changed. I hired a private investigator once, cost me more than I could afford. He found out you were in foster care, but by the time I got the information you had been moved again, different state, different name on the file, the system had swallowed you up and I couldn't reach you. No matter how hard I tried, I am an old man now, too old and too sick to make the journey myself. The doctors tell me I don't have much time left. So I am writing this hoping that somehow, some way it will find its way to you. If you're reading this, then you have come back. You found this box, and you found the truth. I want you to know that I never stopped loving you, not for a single day, not for a single hour, not for a single breath. And I want you to know that you have a choice. There is a development company called Stonebridge Holdings. They've been trying to buy this land for years. They want to tear it all down and put up some kind of resort or a golf course. There's an offer on the table. My lawyer, Judge Cross, he's a good man. You can trust him. He's been keeping them at bay. The offer is enough to pay off the debts and leave you with a decent sum, maybe $40,000. It's not a fortune, but it's a start. You could take that money and go anywhere. Start fresh. Forget this place and this old man who never got to watch you grow up. I wouldn't blame you, not for a second. But there is another option. This farm is more than just land. It's 100 years of our family's blood and sweat and tears. It's the only thing the Callaways have ever really owned. It could be a home villa, a real one. If you have the fight in you, I couldn't leave you much, but I didn't leave you with nothing. Go to the old milk house behind the barn, behind the cooling tanks, third row up from the floor, fifth stone from the left. What's behind it is yours. It's not enough to make you rich, but it might be enough to give you a fighting chance. The choice is yours, my girl. The easy road or the hard one. Whatever you decide, know that I loved you. I loved you both more than I can ever say. More than words on paper could ever express. Your grandfather, Emmett. I couldn't read anymore. The words blurred and swam. I realized I was crying. Hot tears streaming down my face, dripping onto the paper, and I couldn't stop them. Couldn't even try. Sarah was crying too. She had the photograph in her hands, holding it like it was made of the most fragile glass in the world, like it might shatter if she breathed too hard. He didn't abandon us, she whispered. All this time, all these years, and he didn't abandon us. Mom lied to us. She lied about everything. I didn't have words. The anger I had carried for 15 years, the bitterness, the certainty that we had been thrown away like garbage by everyone who should have loved us. It was all dissolving, being replaced by something else. Grief, sorrow. And underneath it all, like a flower pushing up through concrete, that fragile spark again. Hope. My phone died, plunging the room into absolute darkness. We sat there for a yenga team, holding each other, crying in the dark, crying for the grandfather we never knew, crying for the years we lost, crying for the truth that had been hidden from us all this time. Finally, Sparrow spoke. Willa, her voice was raw, rough with tears. What do we do now? I wiped my face with my sleeve. In the darkness, I could just make out the shape of the window, the faint gray light of the moon beginning to rise. In the morning, I said, we go to the milk house. We didn't sleep in the house that night. We found our way out in the darkness, stumbling down the porch steps, clutching the metal box and its precious contents. The moon had risen full and bright, casting long silver shadows across the overgrown yard. We walked the mile back to town by moonlight, following the dirt road until it became gravel, then pavement. Our footsteps were the only sound in the vast Nebraska night. The only motel in Cedar Hollow was a place called the Pine Rest, a single-story building with 12 rooms and a flickering neon vacancy sign that buzzed like an angry bee. The woman at the front desk was named Marge. She had gray hair pinned up in curlers and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She didn't ask questions when two girls with backpacks and tear-stained faces showed up at 10 o'clock at night. $28 for the room. That left us with $40 to our name. But I wasn't thinking about money. I was thinking about the morning, about the milk house, about what was waiting for us behind the fifth stone in the third row. We were there at first light. The milk house was a small concrete block structure attached to the side of the main barn. Its heavy insulated door squealed in protest as I pulled it open. The hinges were rusted, nearly solid. Inside, the air was frigid and stale. It smelled of sour milk and damp concrete in years of abandonment. Two large stainless steel cooling tanks dominated the small room. They were rusted and pitted and long past any useful purpose. Sparrow helped me squeeze behind them into the narrow space between metal and stone. Third row up, I counted the stones in the wall, running my fingers along the rough surface. Fifth from the left. I found it. It looked like all the others at first glance. Gray, rough, ordinary. But when I touched it, I felt the difference. It was slightly loose in its mortar. There was a hairline crack around its edges that the others didn't have. I pushed. Nothing happened. I wedged my fingers into the crack and pulled. Still nothing. Sparrow found a rusty tire iron on the floor half buried under debris. I jammed the flat end into the seam around the stone and pried with all my weight. With a grinding sound of stone on stone, it shifted. I worked it back and forth, until it was loose enough to pull out entirely. The stone was heavy. I set it on the floor and reached into the dark cavity behind it. My hand closed around something wrapped in oilcloth. I pulled it out. It was a heavy rectangular package. The cloth was stiff and cold. I unwrapped it right there on the dusty floor of the milk house, my fingers fumbling with the knots. Inside was a thick stack of cash, hundreds and fifties, wrapped in rubber bands that had gone brittle with age. The bills were old but clean, carefully preserved, and on top of the stack, folded neatly, a single piece of paper. I picked up the paper first, unfolded it carefully. It was the deed to the farm. Stamped in red letters across the bottom were the words, "Paid in full." I counted the money. $50,000. Sparrow made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Oh my God, Willa. That's so much money. That's more money than I've ever seen. It's his life savings." My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Hollow. Reverent. He must have sold everything. The cows, the equipment, everything but the land itself. And he saved it. All of it. For us. I sat back on my heels and looked around the dim, dusty milk house. The rusted tanks, the cracked concrete, the cobwebs thick in every corner. My grandfather had spent his last years alone in this place, sick and failing, watching everything he'd built slowly fall apart around him. And instead of using this money for himself, for comfort, for better care, he had hidden it away in a wall. For us. For two granddaughters he hadn't seen in 15 years. For two girls the system had swallowed up. For family. In that moment, sitting on the cold concrete floor, with $50,000 in my lap, I made a decision that would change the rest of my life. We're not selling. Sparrow looked at me. Her eyes were wide. What? We're not selling the farm. We're staying. Willa. She said my name slowly. Her voice was careful, measured. Are you serious? Look at this place. It's falling apart. We don't know anything about farming. We don't know anything about anything. I know, I said, but this was his, and now it's ours, and I'm not going to let some development company tear it down and turn it into a resort. Not after everything he did to keep it for us. Not after he spent his last years saving every penny so we'd have a chance. Sparrow was quiet for a long moment. I could see her thinking, weighing the options, calculating the risks the way she always did. She was the dreamer, but she wasn't naive. She knew how hard this would be. Then she nodded. Okay, she said. Okay, Willa, if that's what you want, then that's what we'll do. Together. We met with Judge Cross that morning. His office was above the bakery on Main Street, a cramped space filled with filing cabinets and law books and the smell of fresh bread drifting up from below. It was a strange combination. Legal documents and cinnamon rolls, justice and jelly donuts. Judge Cross was a small, neat man with kind eyes behind thick glasses. His white hair was combed carefully to one side. His hands were spotted with age, but steady as he poured us coffee from a pot that looked older than I was. When I laid the cash on his desk, his eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. Well, I'll be damned, he said it softly, shaking his head in amazement. Emmett, you clever old fox. You told me you had nothing left. He explained the situation clearly, patiently, making sure we understood every detail. The property taxes were 2 years overdue, $18,000. The county had been patient because everyone knew Emmett was dying, but patience had limits. Another 6 months and they would have started foreclosure proceedings. The bank held a loan, $12,000. Your grandfather took it out to pay for his cancer treatments in the final months. Chemotherapy, hospital stays, the kind of bills that pile up faster than you can count them. Total debt, $30,000. I pushed the money across the desk. Pay it off, all of it. Judge Cross looked at me for a long moment, studying my face, reading something there that I couldn't see myself. Then he smiled. It transformed his whole expression. Made him look younger, almost boyish despite his years. Your grandfather was my friend for 40 years, he said. Stubborn as a mule, that man. Wouldn't accept help from anyone no matter how bad things got. Too proud, too independent, too damn convinced he could do everything himself. He shook his head. But he was the best man I ever knew. Honest as the day is long. Never broke a promise in his life. And he loved you girls more than he loved anything else in this world. His eyes met mine. I think he'd be proud of you today. Choosing the hard road, that's a Callaway trait. He drew up the papers, wrote the checks, made the phone calls, and just like that, the farm was ours, free and clear. We had $20,000 left. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy cleaning supplies and tools, enough to get the power and water turned back on, enough to buy food while we figured out our next steps, enough to start. The first weeks were the hardest of my life. We attacked the house room by room, like soldiers taking enemy territory. We swept away years of dust and cobwebs. We scrubbed floors on our hands and knees until our backs ached and our fingers cracked and bled. We washed windows until they sparkled, letting light into rooms that hadn't seen sunshine in years. We pulled the white sheets off the furniture and beat them in the yard until clouds of dust rose up like ghosts being exorcised. I learned to fix pipes from a book I borrowed from the library in town. The Cedar Hollow Public Library was a small brick building with a bronze plaque by the door commemorating its founding in 1923. The librarian was a woman named Mrs. Patterson. She had silver hair and sharp eyes, and she didn't ask questions when a 19-year-old girl checked out every book on plumbing and electrical work and basic home repair. The first time I actually fixed a leak, I felt like I had conquered a mountain. The first time I turned the faucet and clean water came out, I stood there for 5 minutes, just watching it flow, hardly believing it was real. We got the electricity turned on. The first time I flipped a light switch and the bulb actually flickered to life, Sparrow and I hugged each other and cried. Again. We seemed to cry a lot those first weeks. Happy tears, exhausted tears. I don't think we could always tell the difference. But the house began to breathe again, to feel less like a tomb and more like a home. We weren't alone in our work. On our fourth day at the farm, an old blue pickup truck pulled into the driveway. I recognized it as the same truck that had brought us from the bus station. But it wasn't Bill who got out. It was a woman, maybe 65 years old. Silver hair pinned back in a practical bun. The kind of face that looked like it smiled often. Deep lines around her eyes. Strong hands that had seen real work. She was carrying a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil. "I'm Opal Hensley," she said. Her voice was warm but no nonsense. "From the general store in town. I knew your grandfather for 30 years. Thought you girls might need some real food instead of whatever you've been scrounging." The casserole was chicken and rice. It was the best thing I had ever tasted in my entire life. Hot, savory, made with love by someone who didn't even know us. Opal didn't stay long that first time, but she came back. Again and again, sometimes with food, sometimes with supplies we couldn't afford, sometimes just to check on us and share a cup of coffee on the porch. "You need anything, you come to my store," she said one afternoon. Her eyes were fierce, almost angry, but not at us. "We'll work out payment later." Or never. Your grandfather helped this whole town through the drought of '98. When half the farms in the county were going under, he organized the relief effort himself, drove his own truck 40 miles each way to deliver supplies. She shook her head. "That's the kind of man he was. This is the least we can do." Others came too. A young woman named Clover Pruitt showed up one morning, 22 years old, wild red hair that seemed to have a life of its own, a laugh that could fill a room and spill out the windows. She arrived with a bus of hand-me-down clothes and stayed all afternoon helping Sparrow organize the upstairs bedrooms. They became fast friends. I would hear them talking for hours about everything and nothing, art, music, dreams, the future. It was the first real friend Sparrow had made in years, maybe ever. And then there was Harlan Pruitt, Clover's grandfather, 71 years old, a face like a weathered road map, hands that had spent a lifetime working the soil, eyes that were sharp and blue and missed nothing. He owned the farm next door, 200 acres of cattle land that had been in his family almost as long as ours had been in ours. He didn't say much when he first came by, just stood at the fence line and watched us work, studied us with those sharp blue eyes like he was taking our measure, deciding whether we were worth his time. On the second week, he finally spoke. "You're trying to take down that field of thistle with a hoe." His voice was dry as autumn leaves. "You'll be here till you're as old as I am doing it that way." He jerked his thumb toward his truck. "Got an old brush hog you can borrow. Hitch it up to that tractor of your grandfather's in the barn, if you can get it running." I spent the entire weekend on that tractor. I drained the old fuel, cleaned the lines, charged the battery, read the faded owner's manual cover to cover until I could recite it in my sleep. On Sunday afternoon, after a dozen failed attempts that left me covered in grease and ready to scream, the old engine coughed, sputtered, and roared to life. A cloud of black smoke belched from the exhaust. The whole machine shook and rattled like it was possessed. But it was running. I drove it out to the field, hitched up the brush hog, and in one afternoon I cleared more land than I had in 2 weeks by hand. When I looked up, wiping a sweat and grime from my face, Harlan was standing by the fence. He gave me a single slow nod of approval. Then he turned and walked away without another word. It was better than a parade. It was acceptance. But not everyone in Cedar Hollow was welcoming. 6 weeks after we arrived, a black SUV pulled into our driveway. Its tires crunched on the gravel with an aggressive sound. Too fast, too confident. The vehicle was expensive, out of place on our dirt road like a shark in a swimming pool. I was on the porch taking a break from painting the railings. My hands were speckled with white paint. My clothes were stained with a week's worth of work. I watched as a man got out of the SUV. He was maybe late 40s, tall and lean, wearing a suit that probably cost more than all our supplies combined. His hair was slicked back. His shoes were shined to a mirror finish that was already collecting dust from our driveway. His smile was white and white, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were cold, calculating. The eyes of a predator sizing up prey. "You must be the Calloway girls." He said it as he walked toward me, like he already owned the place, like he was already measuring it for demolition. "I'm Garrett Lockwood, Stonebridge Holdings." I knew the name, the development company that had been circling this farm like vultures around a carcass. "What do you want?" I didn't get up, didn't offer him a seat, didn't pretend to be polite. He spread his hands in a gesture of openness that didn't fool me for a second. "Just to talk, to make sure you understand all your options." He looked around at the sagging barn, the overgrown fields, the peeling paint on the house that I hadn't gotten to yet. "This is a lot of property for two young women to handle, a lot of responsibility, a lot of headaches. We're handling it fine. I'm sure you are." He smiled again. That cold smile. "But let me ask you something. How much money do you have left after paying off all those debts?" "That's none of your business." "Maybe not." He took a step closer. I could smell his cologne now, something expensive and aggressive. "But I'll tell you what is my business. This land, this 150 acres that's been sitting fallow for years, producing nothing, costing money. This land that's going to keep eating up your savings for repairs and equipment and property taxes, year after year after year, until there's nothing left." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "I'm prepared to offer you $45,000. He said it like he was doing us a favor. "Cash. Today. You sign the papers and all your problems disappear. You can go anywhere. Do anything. Start fresh, somewhere warm. Leave all this behind." I looked at the envelope. $45,000. More money than I had ever imagined possible just 2 months ago. "No." His smile flickered, like a light bulb about to burn out. "Excuse me," I said. "No. We're not selling. Miss Calloway." His voice had an edge to it now, a hint of steel beneath the silk. "I don't think you understand your situation. This property is barely functional. The equipment is decades old. You have no experience, no training, no support system. You're two girls playing house in a place that ate your grandfather alive." I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the tiny lines around his eyes, the gray at his temples, the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth that betrayed his irritation. "We already paid the taxes," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And the loan? Paid in full. So I don't think you understand your situation, Mr. Lockwood. This farm belongs to us now, legally, completely, and we're not going anywhere. For a moment, something ugly flickered behind his eyes. Anger, frustration, the look of a predator whose prey had slipped away. Then the smile was back, wider than ever. Well, he said, tucking the envelope back into his jacket, that changes things, doesn't it? He turned to leave, then paused, looked back over his shoulder. I'll be in touch. Miss Calloway, these things have a way of working themselves out. He drove away. The black SUV disappeared down the dirt road in a cloud of dust. But I knew in my bones that he would be back. That evening, Harlan came to see us. He sat at our kitchen table, his weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold because he'd been talking for so long. He looked older than usual, tired. There was something heavy in his eyes that hadn't been there before. I did some digging, he said. Setting down his cup, his voice was low, serious. Stonebridge has been buying up farms all over this county, 8 of them in the last 10 years. Always the same pattern. He leaned forward. They wait until someone's vulnerable, a death in the family, a serious illness, a bad harvest. Then they move in with their lawyers and their offers and their pressure tactics. And Deke, I asked the question before I could stop myself. The name had been burning in my mind since I read my grandfather's letter. Deke Slattery, the man who had destroyed our family, the man who had taken everything my grandfather sent us. Harlan's jaw tightened. He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee like it held answers. 6 years ago, he finally said, a man came to this farm, drove up in a rust-red pickup truck, same color as dried blood. Deke Slattery, my stomach dropped. He came to threaten your grandfather. Harlan's voice was flat, controlled, but I could hear the anger burning underneath, like coals in a banked fire. Demanded money, said he had rights to the property because of his time with your mother, said he'd take it to court if Emmett didn't pay up. What happened? When your grandfather refused, Deke got violent. Harlan's hands tightened around his coffee cup, shoved him hard. Your grandfather fell against the porch railing, cracked 2 ribs. I hadn't known that. Nobody had told us. My hands curled into fists beneath the table. Your grandfather had a heart attack that night, Harlan continued. His voice was softer now, sadder. Not a fatal one, but bad enough. The doctor said stress, but I knew. His eyes met mine. I knew it was Deke. That man broke something in your grandfather that day. Something inside him that never quite healed. He looked away, out the window, at the fields that were slowly coming back to life. I helped Emmett draw up papers after that incident. Legal documents, notarized and witnessed, stating clearly that Deke Slattery had no claim to this property, no claim to anything, ever. He looked back at me. Your grandfather wanted to make sure that if anything happened to him, that man couldn't touch what belonged to his family. The papers. I breathed the words. That's what Grandpa meant in his letter. Harlan nodded. They're on file with Judge Cross, ironclad. But that won't stop Deke from trying. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. Deke Slattery is still alive, Willa. He's living in a place called Copper Springs, about 4 hours from here. And Stonebridge bought up some of his gambling debts last year. Bad debts, the kind that gets you hurt if you don't pay them. He paused, letting that sink in. My guess is they made him a deal. Help them get your land, and his debts disappear. So they're using him, I said, and he's using them. Harlan shook his head slowly, heavily. It's a devil's bargain. But you girls are the ones caught in the middle. What do we do? He stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the fields, the barn, the land that had been in our family for 4 generations. We fight, he said, all of us, together. 2 months into our stay, the storm came. Nebraska spring storms are something I had only read about in books. Nothing I read prepared me for the reality. The sky turned green first, a sickly, bruised color that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. The clouds churned and boiled like something alive, something angry, something hungry. Then the wind came, out of nowhere, screaming across the fields like a living thing with teeth and claws. It hit the house like a fist. The windows rattled, the walls groaned, the whole structure seemed to shudder. Sparrow and I made it to the basement just as the world outside turned to chaos. We huddled there for 3 hours, listening to the wind howl and shriek above us. The roar was deafening, the crack of breaking wood, the shatter of glass, the bang of something heavy being thrown against something solid. The house shook around us like a living thing in pain. I held Sparrow in my arms. She was trembling, her face pressed against my shoulder. I could feel her tears soaking through my shirt. I held her tighter, and I prayed. I don't know to whom, I don't know to what. I just prayed. Please, please, let us survive this. Let us keep this place. Let us not lose everything again. When we finally emerged, the damage was worse than I had feared. Part of the barn roof was gone, simply torn away like it was made of paper. The boards were scattered across the yard like matchsticks. Some had been driven into the ground like spears. Debris littered every surface. Branches, leaves, pieces of metal I couldn't identify. One of the outbuildings, the old chicken coop that had already been half collapsed, was now completely flattened. Just a pile of splintered wood and twisted wire. Several windows in the house were broken. Water had gotten in. The upstairs hallway was flooded. The estimate for repairs came to $8,000, most of what we had left. Sparrow sat on the porch steps, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking. I don't understand, she sobbed. Why does everything have to be so hard? We try, and the world just keeps knocking us down. She looked up at me. Her face was streaked with tears and dirt and despair. Maybe we should just sell. Maybe Lockwood was right. Maybe we were stupid to think we could do this. I sat down beside her, put my arm around her shoulders, feeling how thin they were, how young she still was. Do you remember what Grandpa said in his letter, I asked? She sniffed. Which part? The part about having a choice, the easy road or the hard one? She was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. I don't think he expected the easy road to be easy, I said. And I don't think he expected the hard one to be easy either. But I think he believed we could do it. I think that's why he left us this place. Not as a burden, not as a punishment, as a chance. A chance for what? A chance to be something. My voice was fierce, surprising even myself. Something more than two girls nobody wanted. Something more than foster kids. Something more than victims. A chance to be family. A chance to belong. Sparrow wiped her eyes. She looked at me for a long moment, searching my face for something. Doubt maybe, or weakness. She didn't find it. Okay, she said finally. Okay, Willa, let's fix the barn. We didn't have to do it alone. Word spread through Cedar Hollow like wildfire. 2 days after, the storm trucks started showing up at our farm before the sun was fully up. Old trucks, new trucks, trucks pulling trailers loaded with lumber and tools and supplies. Harlan Pruitt was the first to arrive. Storm like that is nobody's fault, he said, already rolling up his sleeves. But cleaning up after is everybody's job. That's how it's always been around here. He had brought 15 men with him, farmers from all over the county. Their faces were weathered by sun and wind. Their hands were rough and capable from a lifetime of hard work. They set up ladders against the barn, started hammering before I could even find the words to say thank you. Opal came with food, 3 huge pots of chili, enough cornbread to feed an army, coffee that kept brewing all day long. Clover came too, directing traffic like a general, making sure everyone had what they needed. Water, sandwiches, a kind word. I watched them all working. These people who had been strangers just weeks ago. These people who owed us nothing. These people who showed up anyway. Because that's what neighbors do. Because that's what community means. Because my grandfather had done the same for them when they needed it. By the end of the weekend, the barn roof was fixed. Better than it had been before, actually. New shingles, new support beams, strong enough to last another 50 years. The red paint was fresh and bright against the gray Nebraska sky. When the last truck drove away on Sunday evening, Harlan paused by his pickup. Your grandfather did this for us once, he said. His voice was rough. 1998. Drought took everything that summer. We were all ready to give up, sell out, move to the city, but Emmett Calloway went farm to farm, organized the whole county, made sure nobody faced it alone. He looked at me with those sharp blue eyes, and for the first time I saw something soft in them, something like pride. That's how we do things here, Willa. We take care of our own. Then he tipped his cap and drove away. But not everyone wanted to help us. He showed up on a Tuesday afternoon, 8 weeks after we'd arrived. I was in the field walking the fence line, checking for damage from the storm. Sparrow was in the house working on her homeschool assignments with Clover's help. I heard the truck before I saw it, an old pickup, rust red, loud, bouncing down our driveway like it owned the place. Like dried blood, Harlan had said. He was right. A man got out. He was maybe 55, thin and wiry, a face that looked like it had seen hard years and lost the fight against most of them. His clothes were worn, his hair was gray and greasy. He needed a shave, but his eyes were sharp, calculating, dangerous. I knew who he was before he opened his mouth. "You're Linda's kids," he said. It wasn't a question. His voice was rougher than I expected, like sandpaper on raw wood. "Who are you?" I asked, even though I already knew, even though my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Name's Deke Slattery," he smiled, and there was nothing warm in it, nothing human. "I was a friend of your mother's, a close friend, if you know what I mean." Every muscle in my body tensed. "Get off my property. Now hold on." He held up his hands in mock surrender. "No need to be hostile. I just came to talk, to connect with family." "You're not family. I was with your mother for 10 years, he said, taking a step closer. 10 years. That makes me something. I looked after you girls when you were little, changed your diapers, made you breakfast. The lies came so easily to him, like breathing. "You took the money our grandfather sent us," I said. My voice was cold, hard as the stone in the milkhouse wall. "You stole from us, from our mother. That's all you ever did." His smile didn't waver, but something dark crept into his eyes, something cold and ugly. "Your grandfather was a bitter old man," he said. "He never liked me, made up all kinds of stories. But that's the past. I'm here about the future. There is no future," I said. "Not with you. Leave now." He took another step closer. His smile was gone now, replaced by something that made my skin crawl, something predatory, something patient, something that had been waiting a long time for this moment. "See, here's the thing," he said, his voice dropping low. "I lived with your mother for a decade. Common law, they call it. That gives me certain rights, rights to property, rights to inheritance. You have no rights," I said, standing my ground. My grandfather made sure of that. He went to a lawyer, signed papers in front of a notary. "You have no claim to anything here. Not the land, not the house, not one single blade of grass." For a moment, his mask slipped completely. I saw the rage underneath. The ugly, violent rage that had probably terrified my mother into silence for years. The rage that had cracked my grandfather's ribs and broken something inside him that never healed. Then the mask was back. "We'll see about that," he said softly. He turned and walked back to his truck. His boots crunched on the gravel with each step. At the door, he paused, looked back at me. "You're young. You don't know how the world works yet." His voice was almost gentle now, almost fatherly. It made my stomach turn. "But you'll learn, one way or another. You'll learn." He drove away in a cloud of dust. That night, someone cut our fence. 2 of our goats, the ones we had just bought with part of our savings, got loose and were never found. And on our barn door in dripping red spray paint that looked like blood in the moonlight were 2 words: "Go away." The weeks that followed were a siege. Deke came back 3 times in the first month alone. The first time he just sat in his truck at the end of our driveway for 2 hours. Engine idling, smoke drifting from his exhaust pipe like the breath of some patient predator. He didn't get out, didn't say a word, just sat there, watching, waiting. I stood on the porch with my grandfather's rifle across my knees, watching him watch me. Neither of us blinked. When he finally drove away, I realized my hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. A hot, burning anger that started in my chest and spread outward until my whole body trembled with it. The second time, he left a note in our mailbox. Just a few words scrawled on a scrap of dirty paper. The handwriting was cramped, uneven, like a child's. This isn't over. I showed it to Deputy Morrison at the sheriff's office. He was a young man with a kind face and tired eyes. The eyes of someone who had seen too much and could do too little. He's careful, Morrison said, shaking his head. He knows exactly how far he can push without crossing the line into something I can arrest him for. Sitting in a public road isn't a crime. Putting a note in a mailbox isn't a crime. Unless we catch him in the act of something more serious, there's not much I can do. He paused. His eyes met mine. Except document everything. Keep a record. Dates, times, what he did, what he said. If it escalates, we'll have a paper trail. If it escalates. The words echoed in my head long after I left the station. The third time Deke came, it was at night. We heard the truck rumbling down the road around midnight. Heard the engine stop somewhere close to our property line. Heard footsteps crunching in the gravel. I called the sheriff. By the time Deputy Morrison arrived with his lights flashing, Deke was gone. But our tractor had sugar poured into its gas tank. $2,000 in repairs. Money we couldn't afford to lose. I filed reports, made complaints, documented everything just like Morrison said. But the siege continued. Letters appeared in our mailbox, threatening, vague, carefully worded to stay just this side of illegal. You don't belong here. City girls should stay in the city. Accidents happen on farms. Someone slashed the tires on our truck. We woke up one morning to find all four of them flat, the rubber split in clean straight lines. Someone poisoned the water trough in the goat pen. Two of our animals got sick. One of them died. Each time there was no proof, no evidence, no witness. Just Deke Slattery's rust-red truck glimpsed at the edge of town. Just his smile, cold and patient, when we passed him on the street. He was wearing us down, day by day, week by week, chipping away at our resolve like water wearing away stone. And then Garrett Lockwood returned, this time with a new offer, $70,000. He laid the papers on our kitchen table with the air of a man presenting a gift. His smile was wider than before, more confident, the smile of a man who smelled blood in the water. That's nearly double our original offer, he said. More than this place is honestly worth given its current condition. You'd be set up for years. What changed, I asked flatly. He tilted his head, that predator's smile never wavering. Well, I hear you've been having some troubles. Vandalism, harassment. It's a shame, really, a beautiful piece of property like this, and you can't even enjoy it in peace. Something clicked in my mind, the pieces falling together like tumblers in a lock. You know Deke Slattery? I didn't phrase it as a question. His smile flickered. Just for a moment. Just long enough for me to see the truth behind it. I know a lot of people in my line of work. You're working with him. My voice was rising now. The anger I'd been holding back for weeks was breaking through. That's why he's here. That's why all of this is happening. You're trying to scare us into selling. Miss Calloway, his voice was dripping with false patience. I'm a businessman. I don't associate with people like Deke Slattery, but I will tell you this. He leaned forward. His eyes were cold, hard, the eyes of a man who had done this many times before and always won. He has certain claims that if pursued in court could tie up this property for years in expensive litigation. Legal fees you can't possibly afford, depositions, expert witnesses, appeals. He spread his hands. Is that really how you want to spend the next 5 years of your life? Fighting in court instead of living? Get out, I said. My voice was steady, even though my heart was pounding. Get off my property and don't come back. He stood up, slowly, taking his time, making sure I knew that he wasn't leaving because I told him to. He was leaving because he was done. Think about my offer, he said at the door, because it won't be on the table forever, and neither will Deke's patience. That evening, Harlan called a meeting. It was held at the Baptist Church, the oldest building in Cedar Hollow. White clapboard walls that had stood since 1892, a bell tower that still rang every Sunday morning. 15 families came, farmers and ranchers who had known my grandfather, who had worked beside him, who had been helped by him in their darkest hours. They filled the pews like soldiers gathering for war. Harlan stood at the front of the room. His weathered face was serious. His voice carried to every corner of the sanctuary. Emmett Calloway was the best man I ever knew, he said. When my wife was sick, he drove her to every doctor's appointment for 6 months. When the drought came, he organized this whole county. When any of us needed anything day or night, he was there. He looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. Now his granddaughters are here, and they're fighting for their home. The same home that's been in the Calloway family for 4 generations. The same home that Stonebridge wants to turn into some damn resort for rich folks from the city. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. I say we stand with them. Harlan's voice was rising now, filling the church like thunder. I say we tell Stonebridge and their hired thugs that this community isn't for sale. Not 1 acre. Not 1 square inch. Not now. Not ever. The vote was unanimous. After that, we were never alone. There was always someone driving by the farm, checking on us, always someone calling to ask if we needed anything, always someone watching for that rust-red pickup truck. And the farmers pooled their resources to hire a lawyer from Lincoln, a real one. A woman named Patricia Hayes who specialized in property disputes and had a reputation for fighting dirty when she had to. She came out to the farm on a Tuesday afternoon, walked every inch of the property, read every document, asked questions I didn't know how to answer. Then she smiled. They don't have a case, she said. Deke Slattery's common law claims are worthless. Your grandfather made sure of that. The papers he filed are ironclad. If they try to take this to court, I'll have them thrown out in 5 minutes. She paused. But that's not going to stop them from trying other tactics. These development companies, they're patient. They're relentless. They'll keep pushing until you break. Her eyes met mine. The question is, are you going to break? No, I said. We're not. November came to Nebraska like a thief. One day the fields were brown and gold, lit by autumn sunshine. The next, the world was gray. The temperature dropped 20 degrees overnight. The wind turned bitter, carrying the promise of the first snow. We had been at the farm for almost 4 months. The house was finally starting to feel like home. The kitchen was warm now, the old wood stove burning bright. The living room was clean, the furniture arranged around the fireplace where my grandfather used to sit. Sparrow's drawings covered the walls. Sketches of the farm, the barn, the goats, me standing on the porch with my hands on my hips looking out at the fields. She said it was her favorite view. We had a small herd of goats now, 12 of them, friendly creatures with curiosities and gentle souls. We were already experimenting with making cheese from their milk, following recipes we found in old cookbooks that had belonged to my grandmother. We were surviving, more than surviving. We were building something real. Then at 2 in the morning on a Thursday in early November, the pounding started. I woke to the sound of fists on wood, heavy, angry, relentless blows that shook the whole front of the house. The windows rattled, the floor vibrated, sounded like someone was trying to break down the door with their bare hands. Sparrow appeared in my bedroom doorway. Her face was white with terror. Her hands were shaking. Someone's trying to get in, she whispered. I grabbed the rifle, the hunting rifle from my grandfather's bedroom, the one I had cleaned and loaded weeks ago just in case, the one I had prayed I would never have to use. It was cold and heavy in my hands. Call 911, I told Sparrow. Stay upstairs, lock your door. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe, she nodded. Her eyes were huge, but she didn't argue. She disappeared back into her room. I heard the lock click. I made my way downstairs. The pounding stopped. Then his voice came through the door, slurred, ugly, thick with alcohol. Open up, girls. We need to have a conversation. He was drunk. I could hear it in the slur of his words, the way they ran together, the sloppy, wet sound of his mouth moving. Go away, Deke, I said through the door. My voice was steady. My hands were not. The sheriff's on his way. A laugh, harsh and broken, like glass shatterings on concrete. Sheriff? He spat the word. Sheriff ain't gonna help you. Nobody's gonna help you. You're just 2 little girls playing house. You don't belong here. You never did. We do belong here, I said. This is our home. Our family's land for 4 generations, and you're going to leave now. You're home. Another laugh, this one wilder, more unhinged. This was supposed to be my home. I spent 10 years with your mother, 10 years taking care of her, taking care of you ungrateful brats. And what did I get? Nothing. Nothing but lies and betrayal and a knife in my back. You got the money, I said through the door. Every dollar our grandfather sent. You took it all, every penny that was meant for us. You stole. Silence on the other side of the door. The wind howled around the corners of the house. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. When he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller, uglier. The voice of a man with nothing left to lose. Your grandfather, he said, that righteous old man. He thought he could judge me, thought he was better than me, thought he could throw me off his precious land and just forget I existed. But you know what? His voice dropped lower. Almost a whisper now. I had to press my ear against the door to hear him. He's dead now, and I'm still here. Why are you doing this, Deke? I asked. What do you really want? I want what's mine, he shouted. The pounding started again. Harder this time. The door shook on its hinges. I want what I'm owed. Then he said the words that changed everything. Your mother, his voice cracked, like thin ice breaking under pressure. Your mother is dead. You know that, right? The world stopped. The pounding stopped. My heart stopped. What? She died alone. His voice was different now, not angry, not threatening, something else, something hollow and broken. In some motel room in Nevada. Took them 2 weeks to even find the body. 2 weeks of her laying in there with nobody knowing or caring. He laughed again. But it wasn't really a laugh. It was the sound of something broken. Something that had been broken for a very long time. And you know who identified her? Me. Because nobody else cared enough to claim her. Nobody else was there. I couldn't breathe. Behind me, I heard Sparrow make a sound. A small, broken sound that cut through me like a knife. She was on the stairs. I hadn't heard her come down. Her hand was pressed over her mouth. Tears were streaming down her face. I kept it quiet. Deke continued. His voice was dropping now, almost like a confession. Kept collecting her benefit checks. Because I deserved them. After everything I did for her. For all of you ungrateful people. You're lying. My voice came out as a whisper, thin, weak. I barely recognized it. I'm not lying. He laughed again. But there was no humor in it now. Just emptiness, just bitterness. Just the hollow sound of a man who had destroyed everything he'd ever touched. She's dead, little girl. She's been dead for 2 years and she's never coming back. Just like this farm is never going to be yours. Just like nothing is ever going to work out for you. Because that's what happens to people like us. We lose. We always lose. Red and blue lights washed across the windows. The sheriff had arrived. They found Deke sitting in his truck, head in his hands, too drunk to drive away, too drunk to care anymore. They arrested him for harassment, trespassing, criminal threatening, public intoxication. Later, when the investigation widened, they added fraud charges for collecting our mother's benefit checks for 2 years after her death. He was going to prison, but I barely registered any of it. Our mother was dead. She had been dead for 2 years, and we never knew. I spent the next week in a fog, moving through the days like a ghost, doing the chores, feeding the animals, going through the motions of a life that suddenly felt hollow and strange. At night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about my mother, Lorraine Calloway. Lorraine, who had bright red hair and a laugh like wind chimes. Lorraine, who could make pancakes shaped like animals and knew all the words to every Beatles song. Lorraine, who had chosen Deke over us, who had taken us away from the grandfather who loved us, who had disappeared one day without even leaving a note. Lorraine, who had dated alone in a motel room in Nevada, who had lain there for 2 weeks before anyone found her. I didn't know what to feel. Grief, yes, but also anger, also relief, also a strange hollow emptiness. Like a door had closed on a room I'd been afraid to enter for years. Judge Cross helped us find the records. It took phone calls and faxes and official requests. It took patience I didn't have and energy I couldn't spare. But finally we got the death certificate. Lorraine Marie Calloway died of complications from a long illness, found in a room at the Desert Rose Motel in Henderson, Nevada. Next of kin, none listed, she had been buried in a county cemetery. A pauper's grave, marked only with a number. We drove 12 hours to find her. Harlan lent us his truck. Opal packed us sandwiches and a thermos of coffee. Clover offered to come with us, but I said no. This was something we had to do alone. Just me and Sparrow. Just the two girls our mother had left behind. The drive took us through landscape I had never seen before. Desert, mountains, wide open spaces that made Nebraska look crowded. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? The cemetery was small and barren, just outside of Henderson, a flat stretch of hard-packed dirt dotted with identical metal markers. No names, no flowers, no visitors, just numbers on stakes marking the final resting places of people nobody claimed. Row J, plot 247. We found it as the afternoon sun was starting to fade. It was just a metal marker, about the size of a license plate, stamped with a number and nothing else. This was where our mother rested. This was her final home. Sparrow and I stood there for a long time, looking at the small marker that was all that remained of the woman who had given us life, the woman who had tucked us in at night, the woman who had made us pancakes shaped like animals, the woman who had chosen wrong again and again until there were no more choices left. I knelt down in the cold dirt. The wind was blowing from the west. It carried the smell of sage and sand and something else, something clean and final. I placed the flowers we had brought against the marker. White roses, her favorite according to a note in our grandfather's journal. He had written about her wedding day, how she had carried white roses, how she had smiled, how she had looked like an angel. I forgive you. The words surprised me. I hadn't planned to say them. I hadn't known I was going to say them until they were already out of my mouth, hanging in the air like smoke. I forgive you, I said again, stronger this time. Not because you deserve it, but because I need to be free. Because I can't carry this anger anymore. Because holding on to it is only hurting me. I wiped my face with my sleeve. You made bad choices, Mom. You chose the wrong man. You took us away from someone who loved us. You left us alone in the world. But you were also the woman who sang me to sleep, who taught me to read, who told me I could be anything I wanted to be. I don't understand everything you did. I probably never will. But I forgive you. Sparrow knelt beside me, took my hand in hers. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was strong. Me too, she whispered. I forgive you too, Mom. We stayed until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The colors reflected off the distant mountains, made them look like they were on fire. Then we got back in the truck, and we drove home. Home to Cedar Hollow, home to the farm, home to the place where we belonged. The months that followed were different. Something had shifted inside me, inside both of us. The anger was gone. Not completely, but enough. Enough that I could breathe again. Enough that I could look at the future without feeling like I was carrying a stone in my chest. We threw ourselves into the work. Spring came to Nebraska like a miracle. One day the fields were brown and bare. The next they were dotted with green shoots, life pushing up through the frozen ground, reaching for the sun. We planted an orchard, apple trees and peach trees. They were thin and young, no taller than Sparrow. But they would grow. Everything would grow. The goat herd expanded. 12 became 20, then 25. Friendly creatures that followed Sparrow around like puppies, that nibbled at her shoelaces and bleated when they saw her coming with the feed bucket. We got better at making cheese. The first batches were terrible. Too sour, too hard, too soft. We threw more away than we kept. But we learned. Trial and error, failure and success. The slow accumulation of knowledge that comes from doing the same thing over and over until you get it right. By summer, we had something worth selling. Callaway Creamery, we called it. The name felt right. It felt like coming home. We started selling at the farmer's market in town every Saturday morning. A little table with a hand-painted sign that Sparrow had made. Samples laid out on a wooden board. At first, people came out of curiosity. The Callaway girls, the ones who had inherited old Emmett's place, the ones who had fought off Stonebridge, the ones who had survived. But they came back because the cheese was good. Word spread. By fall, we had customers driving from 3 towns over just to buy it. We had orders we couldn't fill. Requests from restaurants in Lincoln. We were surviving, more than surviving. We were thriving. And then on a crisp October afternoon, the letter arrived. It was addressed to Sparrow. Thick envelope, heavy paper. The return address was the University of Nebraska. She stood in the driveway holding it. Her hands were trembling. Open it, I said. I can't. What if it's a rejection? Open it. She took a deep breath, slid her finger under the flap, pulled out the letter. Her eyes moved across the page. And then she screamed. I got in. She was jumping up and down, waving the letter like a flag. I got in, Willa. Full scholarship, veterinary medicine program, full scholarship. I grabbed her, pulled her into a hug so tight I thought I might break her. We stood there in the driveway, holding each other, crying, happy tears, the only kind of tears I wanted to cry anymore. You're going, I told her through my own tears, whatever it takes. You're going. She pulled back, looked at me. Her face was wet, but she was smiling, smiling bigger than I had ever seen her smile. We did it, Willa. We actually did it. Yeah, I said, we did. 2 years had passed since we stepped off that Greyhound bus with nothing but 2 backpacks and $68. 2 years of work and struggle and triumph and loss. 2 years of learning what it meant to belong somewhere. The farmhouse looked different now. Fresh white paint that gleamed in the sunlight. A new porch solid and straight with a swing at one end where we liked to sit in the evenings. Flower boxes in every window overflowing with geraniums and petunias and marigolds. The barn behind it was painted a cheerful red, bright and proud against the blue sky. Its doors hung straight, its roof was strong. From inside came the contented bleating of our goats. The fields stretched out in every direction. No longer wild tangles of weeds, but neatly fenced pastures and gardens and orchards. The apple trees we had planted that first spring were taller than me now. The peach trees were heavy with fruit. Everything was growing. Everything was alive. It was a Saturday evening in late September. The sun was setting over the fields, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. The colors reflected off scattered clouds, making it look like the whole world was on fire with beauty. Sparrow and I sat on the porch swing. Lucky, one of our barn cats, an orange tabby with a crooked tail, was curled up in Sparrow's lap. He was purring loud and content, his eyes closed in bliss. We had mugs of hot apple cider in our hands, made from apples we had grown ourselves, pressed in a machine we had bought with money we had earned. Everything we had we had built. Everything we owned we had fought for. Everything we had become together. Willa, Sparrow said. Yeah, do you think Grandpa would be proud of us? I looked at the farm, at the house we had saved, the barn we had rebuilt, the fields we had cleared, the life we had created from nothing but stubborn determination and hope. I thought about the old man who had written those letters with shaking hands, who had hidden his life savings behind a stone wall, who had spent his last years alone, sick and failing, holding on to this land for 2 granddaughters he couldn't reach. He never gave up on us, even when he had every reason to, even when it would have been easier to just let go, even when the letters came back and the phone numbers were disconnected and the system swallowed us up. He held on until the very end. I think he'd be proud, I said finally. I think he was always proud of us, even when he couldn't tell us, even when he couldn't see us. I think he held on to us in his heart until his very last breath. Sparrow leaned her head against my shoulder, just like she used to do when we were little girls and the world was big and scary and full of unknowns. I wish we could have known him, she said softly. Really known him. I know. Me too. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun sink lower, watching the colors deepen and fade, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Willa, yeah, thank you. For what? For not giving up, for not taking the money, for believing we could do this when I wasn't sure we could. I put my arm around her. We did it together, I know. But you kept us going. Every time I wanted to quit, every time I was scared, you were there. You always have been. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I didn't try to stop them. That's what sisters are for. The stars were coming out now. Thousands of them. Millions. More stars than you could ever see in the city. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light. Somewhere out there, I thought our mother was at peace. Somewhere out there, our grandfather was watching. Somewhere out there, all the people who had loved us and lost us and found us again were looking down. And they were proud. The story I wanted to tell you isn't just about a farm. It isn't just about an inheritance or 2 sisters who had nowhere to go. It's about what it means to belong, what it means to fight for something, what it means to choose the hard road even when the easy one is right there waiting to be taken. My grandfather didn't leave us a fortune. He didn't leave us a perfect house or a thriving business. He left us something better. He left us a choice, the choice to walk away, to take the money and forget this place ever existed, or the choice to stay, to fight, to build something real with our own two hands. We chose to stay, and in choosing to stay, we found something we had been looking for our whole lives without even knowing we were searching for it. Family, community, home. I think about my mother sometimes, about the choices she made, the path she walked. I don't understand all of it. I probably never will. But I've made peace with it. I've forgiven her. Not because she asked for forgiveness, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to let go of the weight I was carrying. Forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about freeing yourself. I think about my grandfather more, about the man who loved us from a distance for 15 years, who wrote letters he never got to send, who saved every penny so that one day we might have a chance at something better. I wish I could have known him. I wish I could have sat with him on this very porch, watched the sunset together, listened to his stories about the land and the seasons and the 100 years of Callaways who came before. But in a way, I do know him. I know him through the letters he left behind, through the journal still sitting on my nightstand, filled with observations and memories and little notes in the margins about us, through the farm itself, which carries his fingerprints in every board and beam and stone. This land is more than dirt and wood. It's 100 years of our family's blood and sweat and love. It's proof that we existed, that we mattered, that we loved each other even when we couldn't be together. And now it's ours, mine and Sparrow's, to tend, to grow, to pass down someday to the next generation of Callaways. That's what legacy really means, I think. Not money or property or things, but the values we pass on, the love we leave behind, the choices we make that echo through time, touching lives we'll never know. My grandfather made his choices, they led to us, and we're making ours. They'll lead to something too, something good, something lasting. That's the hope anyway. That's the dream. Sparrow left for college on a bright morning in late August. We loaded her bags into Harlan's truck. He had offered to drive her to Lincoln himself, said he wanted to see the campus, said he had business in the city anyway. We all knew he just wanted to make sure she got there safely. The whole town came out to say goodbye. Opal brought a basket of muffins for the road. Clover cried and made Sparrow promise to call every day. Judge Cross shook her hand and told her that her grandfather was smiling down from heaven. I held it together until the very end, until Sparrow was in the truck, until she rolled down the window and looked at me with those big brown eyes. "I'll come back every weekend," she said. "No, you won't," I said. "You'll make friends, you'll study, you'll have a life, and I'll be right here whenever you need me." Her eyes were wet. What if I can't do it? What if I'm not smart enough? I reached through the window, took her face in my hands. "You survived foster care. You survived being abandoned. You survived building a farm from nothing. You can survive anything." She laughed through her tears. "I love you, Willa. I love you too, little bird." The truck pulled away. I watched it until it disappeared over the hill. Then I turned and walked back to the house. My house. Our house, home. That evening I sat on the porch swing alone. For the first time in years, the sun was setting again, painting the sky in colors I had no words for. The fields stretched out before me, golden in the fading light. Lucky jumped up onto the swing and curled against my side. His purr was loud in the silence. I thought about everything that had brought me here. The bus station, the phone call, the letter, the money behind the stone, the storm, the siege, the night Deke came drunk and broken and told us our mother was dead, the forgiveness, the healing, the building. It had been the hardest 2 years of my life, and the best. I wouldn't change any of it, because every struggle, every loss, every moment of doubt and fear and exhaustion had led me here, to this porch, to this farm, to this life. The screen door creaked behind me. I turned to look. Nobody was there. Just the wind, I told myself. Just the old house settling. But for a moment, just a moment, I could have sworn I felt a hand on my shoulder. A warm, gentle hand. The hand of someone who had been waiting a very long time. "I'm home, Grandpa," I whispered. "I'm finally home." The stars came out one by one. The moon rose full and bright over the fields. And somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called. Its voice rose up into the night, lonely and wild and free. I listened until the sound faded away. Then I got up, put Lucky on my shoulder, and walked inside. There was work to do tomorrow. There was always work to do. But that was okay. That was more than okay. Because this was my life now. This farm, this land, this community that had taken us in and made us their own. This was where I belonged. This was where I would stay. The Callaway farm had stood for 4 generations. And now, thanks to 2 girls who had nothing and found everything it would stand for 4 more. We came here with $68 and 2 worn backpacks. We came here homeless and hopeless, running from a past we couldn't escape. We came here looking for something we couldn't name, and we found it. We found family and strangers who became friends. We found strength we didn't know we had. We found forgiveness for those who hurt us. We found home, not just a place to sleep, not just walls and a roof and a door that locked, but a real home, the kind that lives in your heart, the kind that no one can ever take from you, the kind that waits for you no matter how far you wander. My name is Willa Callaway. I am 21 years old. I own 150 acres of the most beautiful land in Nebraska. I make cheese and grow apples and 10 goats that follow me around like puppies. I have a sister who is going to be a veterinarian. I have a community that saved me when I couldn't save myself. I have the memory of a grandfather who loved me more than I can ever say. And I have this moment, this sunset, this life. We came here with nothing. We found everything. And now finally, after all those years of searching and struggling and surviving, after all those years of being 2 girls nobody wanted, after all those years of wondering if we would ever belong anywhere, we are home.